67%. And it's scary to be on the other end of that, to hear that from a friend. But if you hear that from a friend, or you're worried about a friend, it is your job to help that person into clinical care, into resources. Connect them with the resources here on campus, with an adult that you trust, with a national suicide prevention hotline, whatever it may be. That's the extent of your job, but there's so much that you can play in that. I need you to use your voice. Our generation needs you to use your voice so that we can all change the conversation about mental health, starting here on campus and into our communities. Thank you. I'm going to show you a quick 5-minute video about Active Minds. This is on our website too, if for some reason you don't feel like watching it right now. And then we'll have some time for questions. 9 chapters. We do have 9 chapters here in the state of Ohio, but we do not have one here at University of Akron. Just want to put that one out there. So that's us. We have a little bit of time for question and answer. Feel free to ask anything. Nothing is too personal. If it is, I'll let you know. Happy to answer questions about Brian, about starting a nonprofit, about anything that may be coming up. Yeah.
How do you provide funding for nonprofits? How did you exactly go about getting funding for that?
Well, we don't provide funding. We actually seek out funding. Okay. So we are a nonprofit ourselves who we rely on contributions from individuals and foundations. So we have our national headquarters in Washington, D.C. All of our chapters are student groups on their campuses, and so they all get money through the student government on their campus. The fundraising that we do to support our national office is for the staff that I have that work as kind of the technical resources for the chapters, as well as our national programs. And a few of the programs include, we have national days that we've sponsored. In the video, there was some images of backpacks. We have a program called Send Silence Packing, which is 1,100 backpacks that have been donated to us that represent the 1,100 college students who die by suicide each year. And it's kind of our AIDS quilt. And Send Silence Packing is a public display of these backpacks. A lot of them have the stories and the images of individuals, students who have died by suicide, and we go and we travel Send Silence Packing. So we recently actually just got a grant to do a 10-city tour of Send Silence Packing. That tour launched this week and will be concluded actually at The Ohio State University in May. So we seek out funding in order to support our work, and then our chapters do their own fundraising and get funding through the student government. Yeah? I missed the beginning of that.
Would you have started this if your brother was still alive?
Would I have started this if my brother was still alive? That's a really good question. I was interested in psychology and sociology before anything. My mother is a social worker, and I grew up with a bunch of social workers telling me never to become a social worker. So I was interested in the fields. I was always kind of interested in figuring out how both psychology and sociology could connect. And I actually started working at the Center for Bioethics when I was an undergrad. Did that, did my school stuff, and did Active Minds. And it wasn't until midway through my senior year that I realized that Active Minds was actually the perfect combination of sociology and psychology for me. And I didn't have to do this bioethics thing. And so it took me a little while to actually realize that I could make this Active Minds thing my job. So would I have had the passion? Probably not. Would I have thought of doing something like this? Possibly. I can tell you that as somebody who lost my brother to suicide, I was thinking about him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so this was a way for me to channel a lot of that energy, especially in the first few years after he died. And I don't know if I would have had that otherwise. And saying that, I would tell you that I actually feel pretty lucky to have found a passion so early in my life. I graduated and started in an organization, had no idea what I was doing, worked out of my apartment, didn't have a salary. Like, it sounded a lot more glamorous than it was in the beginning, especially. But I had roommates who had no idea what they wanted to do with their lives, and it's taken them 5-10 years to figure that out. So in a way, I feel lucky that I found it. I don't know if I would have found it if he were still alive. That's a really great question. Yeah. Yeah.
What should we do if we're interested in starting a chapter back in
That's a great question. So the question was, what should you do if you're interested in starting a chapter here? A couple of answers to that. We can start a sign-up sheet in the back of the room for anybody who is interested. What I will do is pass on that information to the staff person in my office, Kate, who's in charge of this region, and she will be in touch with you to kind of let you know what the process is. The very basics, that you go onto our website and you get access to our toolkit, which is basically how to start a chapter of Active Minds on your campus. Once the group becomes registered with the student government, then you can register with us and become an official student group. So the process really begins with figuring out how to start a student group here on campus. But that kind of coinciding with people who may be interested meeting with each other to figure out, okay, what do we want to do? What's the programming that we want to do here on campus? That can all happen at the same time. So yeah, we'll start a sign-up sheet in the back of the room during the reception, and then I'll take that information and I'll pass it on to Kate. But I appreciate that. Yeah.
So you had made the comment, you made the point that this is a topic for discussion that is avoided in our society. So if you're observing someone with these symptoms, of just acting strange, what would you say would be the best way to approach them without them feeling defensive? Like, how would you say would be the best way?
It's a really great question. I think the simplest thing is to just be honest and to go up to whomever it is and say, I'm worried about you. Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to talk about something? We don't need to accuse, oh, I think you're crazy right now, or I think you're manic right now. I'm worried about you with something going on. And what's surprising is that, especially when people are in a depression, for them to hear that you care about them and you're concerned about them, it means the world. And we're so afraid to make that statement because we want to respect everybody's privacy, that an inherently isolating illness becomes even that much more isolating. So just be honest. I'm worried about you. Is there something that I can do? Do you want to talk about it? And then let them talk, but know that that's the extent of your responsibility, that there are phenomenal resources to help that person get out of that funk, that what you can do is help connect that person with the resources around on campus and in the community and online. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, so the question is that was this my brother's only attempted suicide and yet he was still in treatment? Yes. There are many people who are in mental health care who are not thinking about suicide or attempting suicide. And Brian was certainly one of them. This was his first attempt. He had actually been hospitalized a couple of weeks before he died because he had told his doctor that he had gotten a step closer to thinking about suicide and making a plan. And at that point, the doctor said, do you think you should be hospitalized? And he said yes. And he admitted himself to the hospital, but then was released. So this was his first attempt. I would say, too, for kind of educational purposes, that one of the strongest risk factors for people to die by suicide is actually previous suicide attempts. And so if you know individuals who have attempted suicide before, that's important to watch out for. And the other piece is, as a friend or a family member, if you're worried about somebody, about maybe them thinking about suicide or they're maybe even going to take their life, the best thing that you can do is ask. The fact that the doctor asked Brian was absolutely what needed to happen. You will not put the idea in your friend's head. But if you ask, hey, are you thinking about suicide? They will probably tell you honestly. And then if the answer is yes, you ask, have you made a plan? And that can help you determine how serious the risk is. That said, no matter what the answer, help that person into treatment. There's no threshold of it has to be a yes to this question and a no to that question for somebody to go talk to somebody or for me to call a hotline. But if you're worried, don't hesitate to ask, and that's the best way to really learn how serious suicidal ideation is for somebody.